Con biết bò rồi kìa. Giỏi quá con yêu.
Gu gaga.
Haha, giỏi lắm.
Hello, dear viewers. Today we bring you a very warm and touching family story. This story tells about the unforgettable moment when Tieu Hue and CEO Tuan witnessed their baby learning to crawl for the very first time. On a peaceful afternoon at home, they were surprised to see their little one trying to move forward slowly on the soft mat. To encourage their baby, Tuan and Tieu Hue even crawled around the living room themselves to show how it's done, creating a scene that was both funny and full of love. With the support and encouragement of his parents, the baby bravely crawled forward for the first time, bringing overwhelming joy to the whole family. If you enjoy heartwarming stories about love, family, and meaningful everyday moments like this, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our next inspiring stories. Thank you so much for watching. A warm afternoon sunlight poured gently through the large windows of the living room, filling the house with a peaceful golden glow. On the soft carpet in the middle of the room, little Tieu Hue sat quietly beside her baby, her eyes full of love and curiosity as she watched every tiny movement. Not far away, CEO Tuan had just finished an important phone call related to his company. Normally, his days were filled with meetings, contracts, and endless responsibilities. But at that moment, none of those things seemed important anymore. He walked slowly toward his wife and child, his serious expression softening into a warm smile. Their baby lay comfortably on the thick playmat, waving tiny hands in the air and looking around with bright, curious eyes. The room was calm, filled only with the soft sounds of the baby's breathing and the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. The baby pushed both little hands against the mat, lifting the small body slightly. The movement was clumsy and shaky, but it was different from before. Tieu Hue noticed it immediately. Her eyes widened in surprise, and she leaned closer, afraid she might miss even the smallest moment. "Tuan, come here quickly," she whispered excitedly, trying not to startle the baby. "I think our baby is trying to crawl." Hearing the excitement in his wife's voice, Tuan hurried over and knelt down beside them, his eyes focused carefully on the baby. For a moment, the little one rocked forward and backward, as if trying to figure out how to move. The tiny arms trembled slightly under the effort, and the baby let out a soft, determined sound. Then slowly, the baby pushed forward. It was only a very small distance, barely a few inches across the mat, but to Tuan and Tieu Hue, it felt like a miracle. Their baby had just taken the very first crawling movement. Tieu Hue gasped softly, her hand covering her mouth as emotion suddenly filled her chest. She could feel tears forming in her eyes, not from sadness, but from overwhelming happiness. "Did you see that?" she said, her voice trembling slightly with joy. Tuan laughed in pure delight, a deep, warm laugh that rarely appeared during his busy workdays. He clapped his hands softly, careful not to frighten the baby. "Our little champion just made the first move," he said proudly. Encouraged by the sound of their voices and laughter, the baby tried again. The tiny knees pressed against the mat, the small hands pushing forward with determination. The movement was slow and wobbly, but it was real progress. The living room suddenly filled with cheerful voices, gentle applause, and loving encouragement. "Come on, baby, you can do it," Tieu Hue said softly, her face glowing with happiness. At that moment, nothing else in the world seemed to matter. Not Tuan's company, not the outside world, not the busy city beyond their walls. There was only a father, a mother, and their little child taking the very first steps of a new journey. And in that simple, beautiful moment, Their hearts were completely full of love and pride. As the baby paused after the first small attempt at crawling, it seemed a little unsure of what to do next. The tiny hands pressed against the mat again, but the little body hesitated, rocking gently back and forth, as if wondering whether to continue. Tieu Hue leaned forward with excitement, clapping softly to encourage the baby. "Come on, sweetheart, try again," she said with a warm smile. But the baby only looked at her with wide eyes, letting out a small giggle before resting its head down again. Seeing this, Tuan suddenly had an amusing idea. He looked at his wife with a playful smile that she rarely saw when he was busy with work. "Maybe our baby needs a little demonstration," he said. Before Tieu Hue could ask what he meant, the CEO of a large company, normally known for his serious meetings and elegant suits, placed both of his hands and knees on the soft carpet. Slowly, he began to crawl forward across the living room floor. "Look at Daddy," he said cheerfully. "This is how you crawl." Tieu Hue stared at him for a second in disbelief, then burst out laughing. It was such a funny and unexpected sight. The powerful CEO she admired so much was now crawling on the floor like a playful child. "Tuan, what are you doing?" she laughed, covering her mouth. But Tuan simply grinned. "I'm teaching our baby," he replied proudly. "Come on, you should help too." At first, Tieu Hue felt a little embarrassed. The thought of crawling around the living room made her cheeks turn slightly red. But when she looked at their baby, who was watching Tuan with sparkling eyes and a delighted smile, she realized that this silly moment might be exactly what their child needed. Laughing softly, she finally lowered herself onto the carpet as well. Placing her hands and knees on the floor, she slowly began to crawl beside her husband. The scene was both ridiculous and heartwarming. A successful CEO and his gentle wife were crawling across the living room like two playful children, all for the sake of encouraging their baby. Their little one watched them with great interest. The baby's eyes followed every movement, and soon a loud, joyful giggle filled the room. It looked like the funniest game the baby had ever seen. "Come on, baby," Tuan called out, crawling a little farther away. "Follow Daddy." Tieu Hue clapped her hands and cheered. "Yes, come to Mommy and Daddy." Excited by the laughter and movement around, the baby lifted its body again. This time, the tiny hands pressed down more confidently. The little knees pushed against the mat, and slowly, very slowly, the baby moved forward. One step, then another. The distance was still small, but it was much farther than before. Tuan and Tieu Hue instantly stopped crawling and turned back toward their child with wide smiles. "You did it!" Tuan exclaimed happily. Tieu Hue clapped excitedly, her eyes shining with pride. The living room was now filled with laughter, cheers, and the joyful sounds of a family celebrating one of the simplest yet most beautiful milestones in their child's life. And at that moment, both parents felt that acting a little silly was the most wonderful decision they could have made. After several joyful attempts, the baby finally managed to crawl a few small circles around the soft playmat. The tiny hands and knees moved with more confidence now, and every small movement seemed stronger than the last. The baby laughed happily, clearly enjoying this new way of exploring the world. Seeing this, Tieu Hue felt her heart overflow with warmth. She gently reached forward and lifted the baby into her arms, hugging the little one close to her chest. "My brave little baby," she whispered softly, kissing the child's rosy cheek. Tuan slowly sat down beside them on the carpet, letting out a small breath as he leaned back slightly on his hands. Crawling around the living room had seemed easy at first, but after several rounds of encouraging their baby, he was surprisingly out of breath. Still, the smile on his face was wide and genuine. His eyes were filled with love as he watched his wife holding their child so tenderly. The baby reached out with tiny hands, touching Tuan shirt as if inviting him closer. Tuan laughed softly and gently held the little hand between his fingers. That simple touch filled him with a deep feeling of pride and happiness that no business achievement had ever given him before. Outside the large window, the afternoon sunlight slowly softened, casting a warm, golden glow across the living room. The peaceful moment felt almost magical. For a long time, none of them said anything. They simply sat together, enjoying the quiet happiness of being a family. Tieu Hue leaned her head gently against Tuan shoulder. Her voice was calm but filled with emotion as she spoke. "I never thought something so small, like our baby learning to crawl, could make me feel this happy." Tuan turned his head slightly and looked at her with a warm expression. He wrapped one arm around her shoulders, while his other hand gently patted the baby's back. "You're right," he said softly. "In the outside world, people celebrate big successes, big deals, and big achievements. But moments like this, they are the ones that truly matter." He looked down at their child, who was now sitting between them on the carpet, still trying to push forward as if eager to continue exploring. Tuan couldn't help but smile again. As the CEO of a large company, he had experienced countless victories and challenges in his career. He had signed contracts worth millions, managed large teams, and faced intense competition. Yet none of those moments had ever touched his heart the way this simple afternoon did. Watching his child grow, even in the smallest ways, felt like the most meaningful journey of his life. Tieu Hue gently placed the baby back onto the mat. Immediately, the little one tried to crawl again, giggling happily while moving forward in tiny, determined steps. Both parents leaned forward, cheering softly and clapping their hands once more. At that moment, the living room was filled not with business discussions or worries about the future, but with laughter, love, and the pure joy of family. And for Tuan and Tieu Hue, there was no success in the world greater than being there together, witnessing every precious step of their child's life.